Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The arrival. The skies over Earth's Arizona desert turned a metallic shade of violet as the Zarin transport ship descended. To the humans watching from their shelters, the alien vessel appeared majestic, its smooth silver hull reflecting the dying light of day. But for the alien girls inside, it was nothing short of a prison. Kayla clutched the cold metal bars of the ship's viewing window, her silvery blue skin glowing faintly under the ship's sterile lights. Her golden eyes scanned the barren landscape below, a strange arid planet full of wild, untamed beauty. A sharp contrast to the perfectly engineered worlds of the Zarin Collective. "We're being dumped here like discarded cargo," spat Erin, sitting in the corner with her knees drawn to her chest. Her violet hair shimmered as she shook her head, her tone a mix of anger and fear. "What can these primitives possibly do with us?" Kayla sighed. "We survive. That's all we can do." Survival wasn't something the Zarin elite prepared their people for. Raised in a society of strict order, Kayla and the others had been taught that perfection and obedience were the keys to life. But questioning authority came at a steep price. The girls had dared to speak out against injustices, and now their punishment was servitude on a world of chaos. The ship landed with a hiss, and the doors opened to reveal rows of human buyers. Kayla squinted at their diverse forms, some dressed in rugged clothes, others in formal suits. Their eyes glimmered with curiosity, wariness, or greed. "Line up," barked a Zarin guard, his voice sharp and unfeeling. Kayla and the others obeyed, their chains rattling as they descended into the hot desert air. One by one the girls were auctioned off. Kayla's stomach churned as she watched her companions taken away, each to an unknown fate. When her turn came, a burly man in a cowboy hat approached. Kayla's new life began on James's farm. The sun was blistering and the work was exhausting, but it was not the hell she expected. James gave her water, food, and, most surprisingly, his word that he wouldn't harm her. "You're not just some tool to me," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I don't agree with this whole setup, but if you're here, I reckon we'll make the best of it." Kayla didn't trust him at first, but over time his actions began to speak louder than words. He never raised his hand to her, never ordered her to do more than she could handle. When she collapsed one particularly hot day, he carried her to the shade and stayed with her until she recovered. Elsewhere, Erin was less fortunate. Assigned to a high-tech research facility, she became a test subject under the guise of employment. Yet even in that sterile environment she found an unexpected ally in Rachel, the lead scientist. Unlike her colleagues, Rachel treated Erin with kindness, sneaking her books and teaching her about Earth's cultures. "You're not just some experiment to me," Rachel whispered one night. "You're a person, Erin." Cultural shock and resentment. The days on Earth stretched long and unfamiliar for Kayla. The farm, though vast and picturesque, felt confining compared to the open skies of Zaria Prime. She worked tirelessly alongside James, her silvery blue skin tinged with the earthy colors of the soil. As the days passed, she found herself both frustrated and fascinated by the peculiarities of human life. One morning, Kayla stood in the kitchen, staring at a strange, humming device. James had told her it was a coffee maker and now she was supposed to operate it. She frowned, tapping the buttons with her clawed fingers. "It's not a spaceship control panel, you know," James joked as he entered the room, a smirk on his face. Kayla shot him a glare. "This primitive technology is inefficient?" James chuckled. "Maybe, but it gets the job done. Here." He leaned over and pressed a series of buttons. Steam hissed and the machine came to life, the aroma of coffee filling the air. "See? Simple." Kayla crossed her arms. "Your world thrives on inefficiency." James didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a mug. "Try it. Might help you deal with all our inefficiencies." She took a cautious sip and recoiled. "It's bitter?" Elsewhere, Erin's days were colder, more clinical. The research facility where she worked was a maze of sterile white walls and fluorescent lighting. Humans in lab coats moved around her with a mix of curiosity and indifference, their chatter a constant reminder of her otherness. Her tasks were often menial, cataloging Earth flora, running data simulations, but they served a greater purpose for her. Each piece of human knowledge she absorbed became a weapon in her growing arsenal of resistance. Rachel, the lead scientist, was the only person who treated her with dignity. "You're learning fast," Rachel remarked one afternoon as Erin dissected a flower under a microscope. "My people's intellect surpasses yours," Erin replied coolly. Rachel smirked. "Clearly. But we've got a knack for improvisation." You might find that useful. Erin didn't respond, though Rachel's words lingered in her mind. Humans were unpredictable, chaotic, yet strangely innovative. They didn't fit neatly into the categories Zarin society prized. One evening, as the two shared an unauthorized cup of tea in Rachel's lab, Erin broke her usual silence. "Why do you treat me differently?" Rachel hesitated, then said, "Because you're not just a worker or an alien to me. You're someone who deserves a chance. Like everyone else." Erin's violet eyes softened, just for a moment. "Your world doesn't treat us like someone?" On the farm, Kayla's relationship with James continued to evolve. At first, she resented him for his role in her captivity, even if he claimed to oppose the system. Yet his actions often contradicted her assumptions. When she accidentally broke a piece of machinery, she braced herself for his anger. Instead, he simply shrugged. "We'll fix it together," he said. "No big deal." This baffled her. Back on Zaria Prime, mistakes were punishable offenses, especially for someone in her position. Yet James seemed more interested in teaching her than in punishing her. As the days passed, Kayla began to notice small things about James. The way he hummed while working, his patience when explaining Earth's quirks, and his quiet respect for her autonomy. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, James broke the silence. "Do you miss it? Your home?" Kayla's gaze lingered on the horizon. "It wasn't home. Not really. It was a cage. Beautiful, but a cage." James nodded. "Sounds like Earth isn't much different for you right now." She glanced at him, surprised by his understanding. "You're not like the others." "Neither are you," he said with a small smile. Meanwhile, Erin found herself at a crossroads. Her growing rapport with Rachel was both a comfort and a source of conflict. She despised the humans who had enslaved her, yet Rachel's kindness was undeniable. Late one night, Erin accessed the facility's database, searching for any information about her and the other girls. What she found made her blood run cold. The Zarin government had branded them as traitors, erasing their identities from public records. Their punishment on Earth wasn't just exile, it was an attempt to erase their existence entirely. The revelation hardened her resolve. She couldn't let the Zarin collective win. And if Rachel truly wanted to help, Erin decided she would need to test her loyalty. The next day, during a quiet moment in the lab, Erin placed a data chip on the table in front of Rachel. "What's this?" Rachel asked, picking it up. "Proof," Erin said, "of what my people did to us. I need your help to expose it." Rachel studied the chip, then met Erin's gaze. "This could get both of us in a lot of trouble. Are you afraid?" As weeks turned into months, Kayla and Erin's separate paths began to converge. Through whispers in the night and coded messages, they reconnected, sharing their struggles and triumphs. Kayla spoke of James's kindness, how it challenged her view of humans. Erin shared her discovery about their erasure and Rachel's willingness to help. "We're not alone in this," Erin said during one of their secret communications. "Some humans are different." Kayla nodded, though doubt still lingered. Could humanity, with all its flaws, truly be an ally? For now, all they could do was survive, and hope. Connections beyond words. The days grew warmer as spring settled across the desert, and Kayla found herself slowly adapting to life on Earth. The sun that once felt like an enemy was now a companion, its golden light a reminder of something she hadn't realized she longed for: freedom. Her bond with James deepened with every passing day. Though she couldn't forget that she was still a slave, Kayla began to wonder if perhaps Earth was not the desolate, hopeless world she had once thought. James's kindness was constant, but there were moments of something deeper, an unspoken connection that neither of them had acknowledged fully. One evening, as they worked together in the barn, repairing a broken fence, Kayla found herself watching James in a way she hadn't before. The muscles in his arms rippled with each movement, his face streaked with sweat but soft with concentration. For the first time, she didn't see him as just her captor. She saw him as a man, someone whose presence filled the quiet spaces in her world. "You're staring again," James remarked without looking up. Kayla blushed, quickly turning her gaze back to the fence. "I was not staring." James laughed, the sound rich and warm. Sure. But if you were, you wouldn't be the first." Meanwhile, Erin's life at the research facility was more complicated. Despite her initial coldness toward the humans, she found herself drawn to Rachel, not just for her intelligence but for her empathy. They were opposites in many ways. Erin's icy demeanor contrasted sharply with Rachel's open warmth, but it was this contrast that made their bond feel so unique. Rachel had become more than just an ally, she was a confidant. They spent long hours together in the lab, discussing everything from the politics of the Zarin collective to the complexities of Earth's ecosystems. And over time, Rachel's presence became a steady anchor for Irin. One night, after a particularly grueling day of data analysis, Irin sat with Rachel on the small balcony outside the lab, watching the stars flicker above them. Rachel offered Irin a mug of warm tea, and though Irin had never been particularly fond of the drink, she accepted it with a quiet nod. "You've changed, you know," Rachel remarked, looking out at the sky. "When I first met you, you were all sharp edges. Now I don't know. I see something different in you." Irin raised an eyebrow, sipping her tea. "And what do you see?" Rachel smiled softly. "Hope. Not just for yourself but for your people. You're not just here to survive anymore, are you? You're here to make a change." Irin's heart raced. "I can't afford to have hope. Not in a place like this." Rachel turned to her, meeting her gaze. "Why not? Why can't you believe that things can be different?" Irin clenched her jaw, frustration building. "Because hope gets people killed?" Rachel reached out, gently placing her hand over Irin's. "It's better than living without it." Back on the farm, Kayla's thoughts of James consumed her more than she cared to admit. There were moments when their interactions felt intimate, though she couldn't quite define why. Their conversations had become more relaxed, more familiar. She caught herself laughing at his jokes even when they were trivial. And when he asked her about her past, she found herself sharing more than she intended. One night, as they sat around the small fire pit outside the house, Kayla found herself staring at the flames, her thoughts adrift. James noticed her silence. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, unsure if she should open up. But something in James's steady gaze made her trust him in a way she never thought possible. "Home," Kayla said quietly. "I think about it sometimes. Not the Zarin collective but the people I lost. I wonder if they're still fighting?" James nodded, his voice gentle. "I think you're fighting too. Every day." Kayla met his eyes, surprised by his insight. "You don't hate me?" James's expression softened. "Why would I hate you? I'm not like you. I'm not even human." James chuckled, a low sound that vibrated in his chest. "What does being human even mean? We're all just people trying to get by. You're just a person who happens to come from somewhere far away." As Kayla's bond with James deepened, so did her awareness of the connection between them. She began to see him less as a human, imperfect, flawed, and bound by his own prejudices, and more as a partner. Not in the conventional sense, perhaps, but in the sense that they shared a mutual respect, a shared experience of survival. One afternoon, while working together in the field, Kayla noticed a faint bruise on James's arm. She touched it gently, her fingertips tracing the mark. "What happened?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. James shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Nothing. Just got careless." Kayla frowned. "You need to be more careful." James's lips twitched. "I'll try to be more careful if you stop trying to fix me." She pulled her hand away, not sure how to respond to the warmth in his eyes. It was a simple moment, but it was charged with something she couldn't yet name. Later that evening, as they shared a quiet meal, Kayla found herself speaking with an openness she hadn't felt in years. She told James about her home, Zaria Prime, the golden cityscapes, the rigid laws, the suffocating beauty of a perfect society. "I never knew there could be freedom like this," she said softly. "On Zaria, everything was always decided for you. Even our feelings. Our love." James's gaze softened, and he placed a hand on hers across the table. "Sounds like you never really got to choose." Kayla looked at him, her heart swelling with an unfamiliar warmth. "No, I didn't. But here," James said, his voice low and sincere, "you get to choose." At the research facility, Irin's growing closeness with Rachel began to blur the lines between ally and friend. But Irin still kept herself guarded, unwilling to fully give in to the connection. She had learned long ago that trusting others, especially humans, came at a cost. But when she caught Rachel staring at her one evening, her gaze soft and full of something unspoken, Irin's walls cracked, just for a moment. "What is it?" Irin asked, her voice surprisingly quiet. Rachel smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. I wish things were different. For you. For all of us. Resistance and secrets. Life on Earth had started to feel almost normal. Kayla had never imagined that she could find solace in the dusty fields of a farm, far from the shining spires of her home. But with each passing day, her resentment toward her circumstances began to fade, replaced by an ever-growing sense of loyalty, not to her captors, but to the humans who treated her with kindness. James was still a mystery to her in many ways, but one thing was certain. He had earned her trust. His quiet acts of compassion had chipped away at the walls she had built around herself. As they worked side by side, the silence between them became comfortable, an unspoken understanding between two people from vastly different worlds. Yet, despite the warmth she felt, a nagging thought would not leave Kayla's mind. The Zarin Collective. Her people. The political machinations that had led to her exile, and the fact that she was not alone in her punishment, weighed heavily on her. She had been cast aside like an object, but there were others. Irin too had begun to grow restless. The research facility, despite its sterile perfection, had never felt like home. It was a cage in a different form. While Rachel had been a lifeline for her, someone who respected her autonomy, Irin could not forget the other alien girls, still scattered across Earth, their fates unknown. They were still slaves. And the Zarin government wasn't done with them. Late at night, when the facility was quiet and most of the staff had gone home, Irin began to sneak into restricted areas. She accessed encrypted files, searching for any hint of information about the fate of the other girls. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how deep the corruption ran. The Zarin Collective had chosen Earth not just for exile, but as an experiment in subjugation. One file, however, caught her attention. It was a report about a covert Zarin mission, a plan to use the alien girls as bargaining chips in a larger political struggle. Earth was now caught in the crossfire of a larger galactic game, and the people here, unaware of their involvement, would soon find themselves on the front lines. The report was damning. If Irin didn't act soon, Earth could become the battleground for a war she wasn't prepared to fight. The Zarin Collective would stop at nothing to regain control of their rebellious subjects, and those who dared to stand against them. Back on the farm, Kayla was starting to notice strange things. James had been preoccupied lately, more so than usual. He would disappear for hours at a time, leaving her alone to tend to the animals and crops. When he did return, he seemed distant, as though something was weighing heavily on his mind. She asked him about it, of course, but he always brushed her off, telling her it was just farm work and nothing to worry about. But Kayla knew better. She had been trained to read people, even if she hadn't been taught to read their emotions. Something was off. And her instincts were telling her that James wasn't just working harder. He was hiding something. One evening, when James returned from yet another long absence, Kayla decided to confront him. "You've been acting strange lately," she said, crossing her arms as she leaned against the doorway. James froze, his eyes flicking to her for a brief moment before he looked away. "I'm just tired, Kayla." "It's nothing." Kayla stepped forward, her heart pounding. "No, it's not just that. Something is wrong. You're hiding something from me." For the first time since they'd met, James seemed genuinely conflicted. He took a deep breath, his broad shoulders slumping as if the weight of his secret was too much to bear. "I'm doing what I can to help you," he said, his voice low. "To help all of you. But I can't do it alone." Kayla's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I've been in contact with some people, humans who want to help the alien girls just like I do. People who know what's going on, who know what the Zarin Collective is capable of. They're organizing a resistance." Kayla's heart skipped a beat. "A resistance? Against the Zarin?" James nodded. "Yes. But it's dangerous, Kayla. And it's not just about saving you. It's about saving Earth. The Zarin won't stop at just exiling you. They'll come for this planet and they'll do whatever it takes to control it." Kayla's mind raced. For the first time, she understood the gravity of the situation. Earth wasn't just a prison, it was a target. And the Zarin weren't content with merely exiling their rebellious subjects. They wanted to make a statement to the rest of the galaxy. "I can help," Kayla said, her voice suddenly steady. "I won't sit by and let them destroy everything. I'll fight." James looked at her, his expression softening. "I knew you would. But it won't be easy. You'll have to trust me, Kayla. We'll need to be careful. The Zarin have eyes everywhere." In the research facility, Irin was making her own plans. Rachel had become more than just an ally, she was now a vital part of Irin's strategy. They had spoken in secret, planning how to expose the truth about the Zarin Collective and their cruel treatment of the alien girls. But there was no way to do this without risking everything. Irin knew the dangers of trust. She had seen the consequences of misplaced loyalty in her home on Zaria Prime. But Rachel was different. She wasn't just some naive human. She understood the stakes, and more importantly, she was willing to take the risk. That night, Rachel handed Irin a small, encrypted data chip. "This contains everything. The plans, the Zarin's movements, everything they're doing to Earth. If we release this to the public, the whole galaxy will know what they've done." Irin held the chip in her hand, feeling the weight of it. This could change everything. Rachel's eyes darkened. It could also get both of us killed? Aaron didn't flinch. I'm prepared for that. Rachel looked at her, her face softening. I know you are. But I'm in this with you. We're in this together. Kayla and Aaron, though separated by distance and circumstance, were moving toward the same goal. They were not just victims of the Zarin collective, they were warriors. Together, with the help of their human allies, they would strike back against the oppressive empire that had forced them into slavery. As they each prepared for the risks ahead, one thing was clear. Their lives, their love, and their freedom depended on the choices they made. And in that moment they both realized that they had found something worth fighting for, something more powerful than fear or resentment: hope. Uniting forces. James's warnings had not been unfounded. The Zarin collective was far-reaching, its influence stretching into every corner of the galaxy. What Kayla didn't know was how far the organization's tendrils had extended into Earth. While she had been distracted with her newfound life on the farm, there were forces at work, human and alien alike, who were watching her every move. In secret meetings, James and his allies discussed the risks of their growing rebellion. The resistance had begun as a small group of disillusioned humans, but it had grown over the past months, its ranks swelling with other alien refugees, some of them former slaves like Kayla. Despite the overwhelming odds, the group had found strength in their unity. Kayla sat in the small living room of James's house, her fingers nervously tapping on the table. He had told her to stay out of sight for the next few days, as they gathered intelligence and made further plans. Yet Kayla couldn't stay still. Every minute away from the front lines made her feel more distant from her purpose. She wasn't a tool, a prisoner, or a spectator in this conflict. She was a soldier. James entered the room, his expression more serious than usual. He placed a data pad in front of her, which Kayla immediately snatched up, her violet eyes scanning the information. "What is this?" she asked, already knowing it was critical. James hesitated before answering. "This is a list of targets. Key installations connected to the Zarin Collective's operations on Earth. Places where they are using technology to track the alien girls. These are places we need to hit, before they can figure out our plans." Kayla's pulse quickened. "And what about the other girls?" James met her gaze, his voice steady but with a touch of urgency. "We free them, Kayla. We free them all. This isn't just about Earth, it's about a galaxy-wide movement. The Zarin can't keep doing this. And it starts with us." Her breath caught in her throat. Free them all. Kayla had always been a lone wolf, accustomed to fighting for her survival alone. But now she was part of something greater. She was no longer a singular victim in the vast, cold universe, she was a part of a collective force. And for the first time in years she felt a spark of something other than anger. Hope. Meanwhile, at the research facility, Aaron was preparing for the moment she had been anticipating for weeks. The data chip Rachel had given her contained everything they needed to expose the Zarin Collective's true intentions. But to release it would require a delicate plan, and more risk than Aaron had ever taken before. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked, sitting across from her in the lab, a rare note of concern in her voice. Aaron nodded. "I don't have a choice anymore. If I don't act, the Zarin will continue to control everything. I can't allow that." Rachel looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the edges of a coffee cup. "I understand. But if we go public with this, there's no turning back. The Zarin won't just stop. They'll send more forces, maybe even bigger, more dangerous forces. I've faced worse." Aaron's tone was sharp, but there was a rawness to it. "If we don't do this now, we'll be stuck forever, slaves to them. All of us. I can't keep running." Rachel's eyes softened. "I know you can't." She reached over, placing her hand on Aaron's. "I'm with you, Aaron. Whatever happens, I'll be by your side." Aaron's heart fluttered at Rachel's words, though she quickly suppressed the feeling. She couldn't afford to be distracted. But in this moment, with Rachel beside her, she felt a quiet strength she hadn't known she needed. The human's loyalty, her unwavering support, was more than Aaron could have hoped for. "If we're going to do this," Aaron said, her voice steady with determination, "we need to act now. I'll release the data, but we need to make sure that the world knows the truth. We'll need help, more than just you and me." Rachel smiled, her expression fierce. "I've already got a few contacts who can get the information to the right people. You won't be alone in this." The following week was a blur of activity for both Kayla and Aaron. The resistance on Earth was quietly mobilizing, preparing to strike at the Zarin's infrastructure. They had no time to waste. Every moment that passed, the Zarin grew more aware of their presence, more ready to hunt them down. James and Kayla worked alongside a handful of trusted human allies, each with their own unique skill set. Some were former military, others were tech experts, but all were unified in their purpose. Kayla's role was to infiltrate Zaren's strongholds, using her unique abilities to gather intelligence and sabotage critical systems. She had trained for combat all her life. It was time to put those skills to the test. On the night of their first mission, Kayla found herself standing in front of a heavily guarded research facility, the first target on their list. The plan was simple: infiltrate, disable the security, and extract critical data before the Zaren could react. But as she peered over the edge of a nearby building, her heart raced. The facility was surrounded by armed guards, more than she had expected. This wouldn't be easy. "You okay?" James's voice came through her comlink, low and reassuring. Kayla took a deep breath. "I'm fine. I'll take care of it." James didn't argue. "Be careful. We can't afford to lose you." Kayla smirked, feeling an unexpected surge of warmth at his words. "I'll be fine. Just make sure you're ready when I give the signal." At the research facility, Iren's moment had finally come. After weeks of careful preparation, the data was ready to be released. The information was far-reaching, but it was clear. Exposing the truth would change everything. Rachel was in her office, working discreetly to upload the data to various underground channels, where it would be picked up by media organizations and whistleblower sites. The Zaren had spent years silencing the truth, but now it would be out for the entire world, and the entire galaxy, to see. As Iren waited, a strange calm settled over her. She had done everything she could to prepare to ensure the truth would be heard. Now, there was nothing left to do but watch as the storm she had set in motion began to unfold. Rachel came into the room, a grave look on her face. "It's done. The data's been sent." Iren felt a rush of adrenaline surge through her. "Now we wait." But as the minutes stretched into hours, the weight of their decision began to sink in. They had made their move. The Zaren Collective would surely retaliate. They wouldn't take this lying down. "Are you ready for this?" Rachel asked, her voice tense. The pieces were falling into place. Kayla's infiltration had been a success, and the data had been extracted. Iren's truth was being spread across the world, and the resistance was ready to rise up against the Zaren. But the war was just beginning. And both Kayla and Iren knew that the fight for their freedom, for Earth's survival, was far from over. The reckoning. The world was changing. The truth was out and there was no going back. The data that Iren had released was spreading like wildfire, across underground networks, social media, and independent news sites. The Zaren Collective, once a distant threat, was now in the global spotlight. Humanity was beginning to wake up to the fact that they were not just bystanders in an intergalactic struggle, but potential pawns in a much larger game. Kayla had seen the fear in the eyes of the human soldiers she worked with. They were brave, but they weren't prepared for the kind of war that was coming. The Zaren, with their advanced technology and military prowess, had resources that Earth's defenders couldn't even begin to comprehend. And yet, Kayla was undeterred. For the first time in her life, she was fighting for something bigger than survival. She was fighting for freedom, for the lives of the alien girls, for Earth, for her people. She stood in the midst of the small resistance cell, a map of their next target laid out on the table before her. The mission was simple: infiltrate a high-security Zaren facility and disable their communication hub. If they could cut off the Zaren's ability to coordinate, they could level the playing field. But Kayla knew it wouldn't be easy. "We have no time to waste," James said, his voice grim as he studied the map. "The Zaren will come for us soon, and when they do, we need to be ready." Kayla nodded. "We will be. This is just one of many steps. But it's the most crucial." James met her gaze, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're the heart of this, Kayla. Without you, we wouldn't stand a chance." She didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't used to being praised, let alone being the cornerstone of a rebellion. But hearing those words, hearing how much James believed in her, filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since she was exiled from Zaria Prime. Elsewhere, Iren was in the thick of her own preparations. The data she had released had set the galaxy ablaze. On Earth, there were protests in the streets, demands for justice, and calls for the Zaren Collective to answer for their crimes. But in the shadows, where the real war was being fought, Iren knew that this was only the beginning. The Zaren were mobilizing. They were sending reinforcements to Earth. And these new forces were far more advanced, more lethal than anything the Resistance had encountered so far. Iren could feel the weight of the coming storm, the pressure mounting with each passing moment. But there was no going back now. She had made her choice and she was prepared to see it through. Rachel stood beside her, her face pale but determined. The tension between them had grown since Erin had released the data. There was no pretending anymore. The stakes had never been higher. Rachel was in as deep as Erin, but that didn't make it any easier. Every decision, every move felt like it could be their last. "Do you think we can win?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Erin took a long, steadying breath. She wasn't afraid of death. She had lived her entire life as a weapon for the Zarin Collective. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about changing everything. "I don't know," Erin admitted. "But we have to try. If we don't, the Zarin will keep doing this. They'll keep using people like us, like Kayla, as pawns in their endless game. I won't let that happen." The night before the mission, Kayla couldn't sleep. The weight of the task ahead kept her up, her mind racing. She paced back and forth in the small cabin James had set up as their base of operations. The quiet crackling of the fire in the corner did little to calm her nerves. Her thoughts kept returning to Erin, to the girl she had never met, yet felt a strange connection to. She had heard the rumors, the whispers in the resistance about the girl who had exposed the truth about the Zarin. It was a bold move, one that Kayla herself wouldn't have had the courage to make. And yet Erin had done it. She had exposed the Zarin, risking her life to show the galaxy the truth. Kayla had always prided herself on being strong, on relying only on herself. But now she wasn't alone. Now there was an entire movement behind her, a network of people willing to risk everything to fight for what was right. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the future of Earth, of the galaxy, of every alien girl the Zarin had enslaved. The fire inside her flared again, burning hotter than before. She was ready. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She turned to find James standing in the doorway, his expression serious but kind. "You ready?" he asked, his voice steady. The mission was set into motion with military precision. The group of resistance fighters, led by Kayla and James, approached the Zarin facility under the cover of night. They moved quickly, silently, through the dense forest surrounding the perimeter. Kayla's alien senses were on high alert, her body moving like a shadow as she led the team toward their target. They reached the outer walls of the facility without incident, and Kayla's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The moment that would tip the scales in their favor, or crush them entirely. James gave her a nod. "You know what to do." Kayla didn't respond, only motioned for the team to spread out and position themselves. She moved to the security panel, her fingers working quickly to hack into the system. The Zarin had sophisticated security measures, but Kayla had faced worse. The system clicked, a low beep signaling that she had gained access. At the same time, Erin was watching the situation unfold from her own vantage point. She had been monitoring the situation closely, aware that Kayla and the Resistance were taking their first big step toward striking at the heart of the Zarin's operations on Earth. She could feel the pressure building. The Zarin would not take this lightly. Rachel entered the room, her face tense. "We're getting reports. The Zarin know we've started to move. They've dispatched reinforcements. This is it, war has officially come to Earth." The battle had begun and the stakes were higher than ever. Kayla and the Resistance had taken the first step, but the Zarin were already preparing their counterattack. They would not go down without a fight. And neither would Kayla, Erin, or the people who had joined them in this struggle for freedom. The reckoning had come. But it was only the beginning. A new dawn. The fight had escalated faster than anyone had expected. Within hours of the Resistance's successful strike on the Zarin facility, the enemy was retaliating with force. Earth was now a battleground, the skies filled with foreign ships and the streets teeming with armed soldiers. The Zarin Collective, not used to being challenged, had unleashed its full military might. But Kayla, Erin, and their allies weren't backing down. Kayla crouched low behind the remains of a destroyed communication tower, the night air thick with the acrid scent of burning debris. The Resistance had moved quickly, striking at Zarin facilities all over the world. But this was the turning point. The Zarin had made it clear that they were willing to destroy Earth to regain control. She looked up at the stars, her heart pounding in her chest. The fight was far from over. Her fingers tightened around the pulse rifle in her hands as she scanned the area, every sense on high alert. Her team had been cornered in the ruins of an old city, a safe house they had used as a staging ground for operations. It was no longer safe. James's voice crackled through her comms. "Kayla, status?" "We're holding the line," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. "But we need reinforcements. The Zarin are massing troops in the city center. We can't keep them back forever." James's reply was terse but filled with resolve. Stay strong. We're on our way. Just keep pushing them back. The others are waiting for your signal. Elsewhere, Irin was sitting at the helm of a commandeered Zarin ship, staring at the screen in front of her. The war had escalated quicker than even she had anticipated, but the resistance was adapting. The data she had released had sparked more than just outrage. It had sparked a movement. Alien and human rebels alike had joined their cause, the ranks of the resistance swelling each day. But the Zarin weren't going to let this go easily. Irin had learned from their tactics, their strategies, and now she was using their own methods against them. She'd hacked into their communication systems, intercepting their military broadcasts and sending false intel to disrupt their formations. But even as she worked, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on her. The Zarin weren't just trying to take back Earth. They were trying to crush the resistance before it could spread beyond Earth's borders. We need to hit them harder, Irin said, her voice calm but filled with determination. She turned to Rachel, who was monitoring the status of their fleet. If we don't strike at their core, they'll keep coming. We need to take out their command structure. Rachel looked at her, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. You're talking about going after their main base. Irin, that's suicide. Irin met Rachel's gaze, her expression unyielding. I didn't survive this long to back down now. We have to show the galaxy that we're a force to be reckoned with. We've already done enough to throw them off balance. But if we don't strike now, they'll regroup and come for us with everything they've got. Rachel nodded slowly, a grim smile forming on her face. You've got the guts, I'll give you that. But if we're going to do this, we'll need every last one of our ships. Kayla's team was holding their position, but the Zarin were relentless. The streets echoed with the heavy sounds of alien foot soldiers marching, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the city. Kayla's heart was racing and she could feel the sweat trickling down her neck. Her team had fought hard, but it was becoming clear that the Zarin were not going to give up. They had far more resources, far more soldiers. But they weren't prepared for Kayla's ferocity, or her determination. The first explosion rocked the ground, followed by another and then another. Kayla's eyes widened as a massive Zarin ship descended into the heart of the city, its landing ramp lowering as dozens of heavily armed Zarin soldiers poured out. Reinforcements have arrived, Kayla muttered under her breath. Now we need to make them pay. On the Zarin flagship, the alien overlord Korath stood in the command center, his face twisted into a snarl. He had been watching the rebellion unfold, the resistance's unexpected victories causing a slow boil of fury to rise within him. How dare they challenge the Zarin collective, his collective? How dare these humans and their weak allies think they could stand against the might of his people? Korath, one of his subordinates said, her voice trembling. The human insurgents are gaining ground. They've infiltrated our supply lines and we've lost contact with some of our forward positions. Korath's eyes narrowed. Then we'll stop them. Send in the elite troops. We will crush them once and for all. Kayla's team was moving through the chaos, fighting their way through the heart of the Zarin blockade. The streets were littered with debris, smoke curling into the air as explosions rocked the ground. The Zarin had brought everything they could to bear, but Kayla was focused. She could hear the pulse of her heartbeat in her ears, the sound of her comrades fighting beside her, and the fire in her chest growing stronger with each passing second. Irin and Rachel's fleet was already on the move, and they had successfully breached Zarin-controlled space. The Zarin flagship loomed large before them, a symbol of the power and arrogance of the collective. But the resistance fleet wasn't backing down. This was their moment. Irin stood at the helm of the lead ship, her hands steady on the controls as she prepared to launch the final assault. Her eyes were locked on the flagship, a surge of adrenaline rushing through her veins. Irin, Rachel said, her voice steady, we're ready. We hit them with everything we've got. Irin's eyes burned with determination. Then let's make them regret ever underestimating us. As the battle raged on, Kayla's team infiltrated the heart of the Zarin command post, setting charges at critical points in the facility. The countdown had begun. One by one the Zarin forces fell, their defenses crumbling under the weight of the resistance's persistence and ingenuity. Kayla's heart raced as the final charge was set. The moment of truth was upon them. Everyone out, she shouted into her comms. Now? The battle wasn't over. But for the first time in years, Kayla and Irin saw a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Earth had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon for all who had suffered under the tyranny of the Zarin collective. They were not alone anymore. The dawn of a new era had arrived. The final stand. Kayla stood amidst the rubble, her breathing heavy, sweat beading on her forehead. The mission had been a success, but the battle was far from over. She could hear the sounds of conflict in the distance. The Zarin forces were regrouping and their reinforcements were not far behind. "Kayla, we're getting reports." James's voice crackled through her comms. "The Zarin are reeling but they're coming back strong. We need to consolidate our gains before they can recover. We can't afford to give them a chance to regroup." Kayla's grip on her weapon tightened as she scanned the horizon. The night had fallen over the city, but the glow of distant explosions painted the sky an eerie red. She could feel the tension rising within her, but there was no time for hesitation. They had fought too long, sacrificed too much, to let this moment slip away. "How long do we have?" she asked, her voice cold but determined. "Not long," James replied. "They're sending their elite forces in. You know the ones. If we don't stop them here, Earth will be their next conquest." Kayla's mind raced. The Zarin had sent their best, their most deadly, and it was clear they were willing to risk everything to reclaim control. But Kayla wasn't the same girl who had been exiled years ago. She had learned from the humans, from Irin, and from the strength of those around her. The resistance had something the Zarin could never understand: unity, purpose, and an unyielding will to fight for their freedom. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Irin was preparing for the final stage of the rebellion. The Zarin flagship loomed large above Earth's atmosphere, and the resistance fleet had surrounded it. The Zarin had underestimated them, thinking that their technological superiority would be enough to crush the insurgents. But the tables had turned. The resistance had adapted, learned from their enemies and fought back with everything they had. Irin's hands were steady as she adjusted the controls of her ship. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing on her shoulders, but there was no turning back now. She had seen the future she wanted, a future where the Zarin no longer held dominion over the galaxy, and she wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. "Irin, we're ready," Rachel's voice came through her comms. "The fleet is in position and our forces on the ground are holding strong. It's time." Irin nodded, the determination in her eyes visible even through the helmet she wore. "Let's end this." The order was given, and the resistance ships surged forward, launching a coordinated assault on the Zarin flagship. The first volley of missiles hit the flagship's shields, sending ripples through the enemy vessel. The Zarin were retaliating, but this time their forces were spread thin. They were overwhelmed. Back on Earth, Kayla's team was holding the line as the Zarin elite forces advanced. The ground shook with the force of their weapons, and the air was filled with the sound of gunfire and explosions. The resistance fighters were outnumbered, but they were not backing down. "Stay focused," Kayla shouted over the comms, her voice ringing with authority. "We're almost there. Keep pushing." She could see the Zarin forces closing in on their position. Tall, heavily armored soldiers with energy shields that seemed impervious to their weapons. But Kayla had faced worse. She wasn't about to let these elite soldiers intimidate her. She signaled to her team and they moved into position. Kayla's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the battlefield. The Zarin elite soldiers were preparing to charge. She could feel her pulse quicken as she prepared to make her move. "Now," she shouted. The resistance fighters fired in unison, hitting their targets with precision. Kayla sprinted forward, her pulse rifle raised, her heart pounding with adrenaline. She dodged a blast from a Zarin soldier's energy cannon, sliding into cover behind a destroyed vehicle. Her mind was sharp, calculating. The Zarin soldiers were strong, but they lacked the creativity, the adaptability that the humans, and Kayla herself, had learned through years of resistance. She saw an opening. With a swift movement, Kayla flanked the enemy, firing a shot that took down one of their commanders. The Zarin soldier crumpled to the ground, and the rest of his squad hesitated for just a moment. It was all the resistance needed. On the Zarin flagship, the situation was no better. Irin's fleet had breached the outer defenses, and the flagship was now in chaos. Zarin soldiers scrambled to defend their vessel, but it was too late. The resistance had already planted the seeds of their destruction. Irin was on the bridge of her ship, watching as the Zarin flagship took hit after hit from their forces. She had one final move to make, one final strike that would end this war once and for all. "Prepare the final assault," Irin ordered, her voice calm but filled with the weight of the moment. "We need to take out their power core." The final assault began, and a barrage of energy blasts hit the Zarin flagship's main reactor. The massive ship groaned as its systems began to fail, lights flickering across the control panels. Irin's heart raced as the countdown began. "Get ready to pull back," Irin said to Rachel. "Once we hit the core, we don't have long." Back on Earth, the battlefield was finally quieting. The resistance had won, but the cost had been great. As the smoke cleared, Kayla surveyed the battlefield. Her team had held the line, and the Zarin had retreated, their forces scattered and broken. "We did it," James said, his voice soft with disbelief. Kayla nodded, but her eyes were focused on the horizon. The battle was over, but the war had changed everything. Earth was free, but it was up to them to ensure it stayed that way. As Kayla stood in the ruins of the battlefield, she looked to the skies, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. Earth had won its freedom, but the fight for justice and peace would continue. She wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.